You played anything else?
Yeah. I mean, for this, I'm going to go a little off-piste and talk up not a game, but a peripheral for the Steam Deck, which has enabled me to play other games. So it still has its own efficacy. I've mentioned before when talking about my play habits that on both the Switch before and now the Deck, which are ostensibly handheld first consoles, I probably spend around 90% of my playtime with them docked. And on Switch, that was fine because the worst problem you were going to have is just slightly smeary visuals, maybe, when they're upscaling to a bigger screen. But on the Deck, you can also be faced with the challenge of certain games having inputs and interfaces that are not really designed with controllers and a TV in mind because they're PC games, first and foremost.
Yeah.
So if you're playing handheld, you'll use the OK because you've got a touchscreen, you've got dual trackpads, you can make something work. But since my unwritten mission has become to be able to play absolutely everything via the Deck in every single setup, I've long fought with this challenge of how to make games that are designed with mouse control in particular feel good in like a couch configuration. You can bind the analog stick of a controller to be a mouse, and sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't really work, but even at its best, it never feels super precise. So as a first experiment, a number of months ago, I tried using a PlayStation 5 pad as my primary Deck controller because I assumed that the touchpad could be kind of a serviceable mouse in a pinch. Yet, even with sensitivity tweaks, it often felt quite jittery and imprecise with the cursor just like warping across the screen in weird ways sometimes, and I've never really known why or what's going on. So again, it was fine in a pinch, but it's not really ideal. Depending on the game, the touchpad was a bit more granular than the analog stick, pretending to be a mouse, but having to shift your hand over the top of the controller as well to access it is not great if you want to play a game that is exclusively mouse-driven. So I was still on the lookout. As a next venture, a few months back, I tried a weird controller called a Darkwalker Shotpad that I saw reviewed on YouTube. And it's essentially just a big touchpad with a range of keyboard buttons that have been shotgun blasted over every other surface of it.
What's it called, sorry?
It's called the Darkwalker Shotpad, but it's rubbish.
There we go.
It let me down during its maiden voyage because it had really spotty connectivity. I was close to the TV and the Deck, and it was still dropping inputs. The input from the trackpad itself just didn't feel right, and again, would sometimes just like zip across the screen when you weren't expecting it to. And it just didn't make any sense with this button mapping either because it's all keyboard keys, and therefore it's way less customizable than a pad is with Steam input. So you couldn't really say, I'm going to make the F key be something else. Whereas on a pad, you could say, I would like the A button to be something else quite comfortably. So it went back to Amazon the next day. That was a real failed attempt. Fast forward to now, and I think I've finally solved the problem, with the solution being simultaneously very obvious and also left field in a strange way as well. Because back in 2015, Valve themselves developed a controller for Steam called the Steam Controller.
Oh, yes.
And in many ways, it laid loads of the groundwork for the Steam Deck itself. If you look at the two side by side, you can tell the designers are the same team. And if you haven't seen one of these pads before, it is a bizarro piece of tech because it includes regular face and shoulder buttons. It's got two back paddles, but it has just one analog stick. And instead of a D-pad or a second stick, it's got two massive circular trackpads. And it was discontinued before we even hit 2020. So it can be pretty tough to track down with the required wireless dongle. But I can say now, with one of these pads in hand, if anyone is serious about playing a large swathe of PC games on a TV, I think this controller is essential. I think it is the answer.
Oh, wow.
I've spent a good week now running it through its paces. And it just feels good. just feels good to be a mouse under your thumb. Like I played a few rounds of a dice rolling roguelike called Slice and Dice, which I recommended to you off air a little while ago, and fully expect to hear more about in the future because it was very much a Jonathan Dunn game, I thought, from the moment I booted it up. And I found that playing that, selecting options, rolling dice, it became infinitely easier than when I was trying to use a regular thumbstick before. So with the trackpad, your right thumb is just sitting there. It's much more comfortable. It's got really nice, subtle tactile feedback. So it kind of buzzes very similar to how the Steam Deck does when you use the touchpads. So you can feel when you're moving. You know, it makes small movements feel very intuitive as well. I also played most of the first world now of Terra Nil, the game you talked about last month, after picking it up in the Steam sale. And again, when I first grabbed it, I tried to play it docked, use my regular pad. I found it was just too clunky, too cumbersome in that configuration. And I'd kind of resigned myself to just having to play it handheld sometime if I wanted to do it properly. But here, with the Steam controller, it just clicked. And I was able to more precisely terraform the land and bring life back to my little arid desert plains. And whilst the analog stick before was kind of, again, serviceable, you could move your cursor around, having it set up like this, the analog stick instead becomes the camera control. And then it's your right thumb on the trackpad that is your cursor. And it just feels right. You know, you've then got the back triggers, which can be your left and right click. It just sits nicely in the hand. The game I've played the most, though, with this new controller has been the legendary casual game and time sync, Fairy Solitaire. I love this game. Like, I really, really like this game. I sat down on Saturday evening with the Steam controller in my hand at about 8 p.m. Georgia was out at work on a sleep-in, so she wasn't coming back that night. And with a blink, suddenly it was close to midnight. You know, the sun had long set. My eyes were hot from tiredness, but it was such a breeze to play with this controller because the acceleration of the trackpad is just perfectly tuned to allow micro and macro movements. It just lets your cursor zip across the board really easily to chase runs of cards. There are some absolute sickos out there who will insist that this controller is the best for every genre in the world. And, you know, they would say it's mixing the convenience of a regular gamepad with the customization and precision of a mouse and keyboard setup. But for me, I think it's very unlikely that I'm going to start evangelizing it to that extent because I still have 30 plus years of console muscle memory coursing through my little fingies. So, you know, I'm not going to do that. But knowing that I now have a viable option for a whole range of previously inaccessible games to play on the sofa is really exciting. Like, again, in the sale recently, I picked up the whole Command & Conquer Ultimate Collection because it was about £6. I've got a billion other kind of real-time strategy games in my library from sales and bundles gone by. I've got a whole spread of like Match 3 and Bejeweled likes that are good fun to play, but they always feel pretty guff with a regular analog stick. There are even some like twin stick shooters developed for the PC that expect you to be using WASD and a mouse as your second kind of, you know, twin stick. And for that kind of thing, I'm really interested and excited to see how all of these genres translate to this hybrid controller. There's just an awful lot to explore. Very exciting toy for someone like me who just likes fucking around.
Yeah.
Like, it's really tragic that it's been out of production now for nearly 5 years. Because I would recommend anyone who matches my Steam Deck use case, being that they like it docked, they like to sit on the sofa, they like to play games like that, to consider trying to find one, like on a marketplace online, before they become completely inaccessible. Because, you know, everyone that gets damaged, that's one less in the pool forever.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely worth checking out and seeing what you can find.
They got several in stock on CEX online.
Well, it's not bad. How much do they charge there?
£72 for them for an A condition one with the dongle.
So that's what you need. I mean, I lucked out with eBay. I found one for about 50, so it was cheaper than that, and it was kind of an investment. I thought that I could sell it on if it was no good because I knew the market rate was a little bit higher. But it's been absolutely worthwhile for me. I've really, really enjoyed playing some of these games, and yeah, Very Solitaire. Oh, what a game!
Have you ever played Solitairica?
No. Am I going to enjoy that as well?
Oh my goodness, yes. Get Solitairica. It is brilliant.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah. It's available on everything. I picked it up and started playing it again on iPhone, but it's got a really nice like, you know, console version. And it's cheap as chips, and it's really good. It's really good. But yeah, I've been really surprised when I've played games on the Steam Deck because I play it 100% handheld. I don't even know where my dock is. I've got one. It's somewhere. I like the last time I used it was when I was faffing around with like the Linux side of things because I could plug a keyboard in and it made it a bit easier. But when there are certain games that I want to play and it asks me to like use a trackpad as a mouse cursor or a cursor like that, my instinct is always, I just can't be bothered then. I can't be bothered. But when I give it a go, it's phenomenal how well it works and just how responsive it feels. That sort of haptic feedback that you get is just amazing. And yeah, like, I mean, it's funny you talking about, you know, it like that when it's like, well, yeah, that's how I play all games. Because I just play it handheld.
It's such a versatile machine, the Steam Deck. You know, you've just said how well it runs Doom Eternal, like a huge, flashy thing. in a very consoleized kind of format when you're playing it with, regular sort of controller input. But equally, you've got all this other kind of stuff you can get to. It's just, there is such a wealth of stuff to play and do on this machine. And the fact that you can pick them up for like about £300 these days is genuinely mad. Like it's the best value thing I think you can buy if you're interested in playing video games in any configuration or format.